So I started applying again. This time got more interviews, interviewed at probably 5 or 7 data science roles, got rejected for all of them. But I did get this one Amazon business analyst role. The catch was a 40% pay cut. But I was like, I'll take it. The finance job took me to Charlotte, North Carolina. And when I was there, I got to dance in the NFL, like be a cheerleader in the NFL. And the Panthers made it to the Super Bowl when I was there.
You cheered them to the Super Bowl. It's a big part of it.
I got to dance at the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
And I think about it sometimes and I'm like, if I had gotten that full-time offer coming out of college, I would probably have been a millionaire before I was 30, right? But I would never trade this experience of being able to dance at the Super Bowl for any amount of money in the world. And I try to remind people like life takes you on unexpected paths, but there's something in there waiting for you that's more beautiful than you can ever imagine. I think creativity is a big part of data science that isn't really talked about. All the problems that can be solved with standard solutions probably have been solved or have been automated, right? So now more and more being able to be creative in the way you solve problems becomes more important as a data scientist. And so if you feel like you're a creative person, I think find a way to pull that in to your data science work and let that be your superpower.
Hey, Dawn. Thank you so much for joining us today on Data Neighbors podcast. We are so excited to have you here. So for everyone in the world of LinkedIn and data science, Dawn is one of our biggest content creators. So welcome, Dawn.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Hey, Shravya. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Dawn.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Dawn, I would love to know a little bit about you, what has got to where you got today, right? And I know you've got really good experience in different parts of the data science world, starting from business analytics to data science, starting from, you also have the big names like Amazon and Facebook and Meta, right? And also you've worked in startups, so really diverse and varied type of experience. So would love to know a bit about like maybe how you started to get there.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try to tell my story. So I started my career in finance. I studied engineering in college. My first job out of college was in finance. I went to Bank of America. I really didn't enjoy being in finance. And so it was really important for me to try and get out. I stayed in finance still for about like 3.5 years. And then I tried really hard to move into tech. But I tried and could not get any offers for any data science roles, which was my dream job at that time. But I knew coming from finance, it was going to be a little bit of a stretch. So I took a business analyst role at Amazon. And that role I took, even though it gave me a 40% pay cut from my finance job, but I was like, I have to get my foot in the door. Yeah, so I did it. I took the pay cut. Then when I was at Amazon, I worked as a business analyst before getting promoted into a business intelligence engineer. And then, again, tried to get into data science roles, started interviewing everywhere, and that's when I got my offer at Meta. I was deciding at the time between Meta and Spotify and Venmo, I think, at the time. Really, the decision was between Venmo and Meta. My decision was between Spotify and Meta. Spotify, I thought, was like super cool company. Everyone like I talked to just felt like such fun and cool people I wanted to hang out with. But I eventually decided to go to Meta because everyone I talked to at Meta seemed so much smarter than me. And I was like, okay, this is probably the better career choice. So I went to Meta, and at the time it was still called Facebook. And that I started at Instagram, worked there for a few years, and then a few years in, started to get really jaded. Didn't really like being at Instagram anymore. This was when I felt like Instagram wasn't really innovating and just trying to be like TikTok. And it just didn't align with my vision of what the company could be. And so I decided to look around again. And this time I decided to focus on more mission-driven companies that aligned with things that were values that are important to me. And so I decided to go to Patreon at that time, which was such a cool company. I like Patreon because they focus on creatives and arts, and I'm a dancer myself, so I like really feel for artists. And did that for a year. But then I decided I wanted to be fully remote because I was building a van into a tiny home. This is a whole side story. I built a van into a tiny home and I was ready to travel. And so it was time for me to look for a fully remote role, but I still wanted to stay in the mission-driven company space. And so I ended up going to education tech, work at Class Dojo, did that for a year before and when I was at Dojo, I decided to start writing on LinkedIn and like just love writing on LinkedIn. I like teaching content and like creating content on LinkedIn. And I started a coaching business on the side. And in like 6 months or so, I got to a point where nowhere near close to replacing my salary, but I was making enough money that I think I can cover like my basic needs and live off savings for a while. So I decided to quit my job, and now I'm a full-time entrepreneur. I am still doing content, and I am trying to build I'm also building some data products that I'm hoping to have my first one released in the next few days. So yeah, stay tuned.
Wow. That was amazing. I'm just surprised by how fast you went by your entire story, actually. That's
so fast. I felt like I just rambled for like 5 minutes.
Not at all. No, by fast in the sense, I meant you just covered like almost entirely your career, and in like covering the most important things. And I think questions at every stage. Yeah. So first question, Dawn. So you did your engineering, and how did you end up in finance? Like that's pretty interesting. Engineering and finance. Was it doing engineering in finance domain?
So I studied industrial engineering, so which more like a little bit more like the business side of engineering, and there was a very, very small finance component in there. But so I was an international student, and for me to stay in the country, it was more important that I got any job that would sponsor my visa versus finding a job that aligned with my interests. And at that time, I thought I wanted to be in consulting and investment banking. That's because everyone was doing that. And I couldn't get any of those jobs. I interviewed for maybe 40 jobs and only got this one offer. And so I took it.
That's just like an example, right, Dawn? When people there's so many people right now who still have the same issues with visa, and especially in current times where it's super hard to get into the industry. So this is like an example. So if you see yourself, it's harder to get into the current job market, into a role that you'd want to get into, take up any job opportunity and you can walk your way into the job opportunity. Like if I would condense your story, finance analyst or finance, what was the job then?
I was like a quantitative finance analyst.
Quantitative finance analyst, business analyst, BI engineer, data science, right?
Yes. And an entrepreneur.
I'm an entrepreneur. Oh my God. Like that's like an amazing story right there. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, the way I like to think about it too is I think life puts you on a path that is going to be best for you, whether or not you know in that moment. Like, so I didn't tell this earlier, but I had an internship at Facebook in my junior year. And, most people in their junior year do internships with the hope to get a full-time offer to come back after graduation. I was a terrible intern, so I don't blame my manager at all. I did not get a return offer. And I felt like shit about that for years upon years. I just I really screwed up an opportunity that is a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. And I felt so shitty about it. Okay. So I felt so bad about myself. I thought I really messed up. And then the finance job took me to Charlotte, North Carolina. And when I was there, I got to dance in the NFL, like be a cheerleader in the NFL. And the Panthers made it to the Super Bowl when I was there. So it's
you cheered them to the Super Bowl. It's a big part of it.
I got to dance at the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
And I think about it sometimes, and I'm like, if I had gotten that full-time offer coming out of college, I would probably have been a millionaire before I was 30, right? But I would never trade this experience of being able to dance at the Super Bowl for any amount of money in the world. And I try to remind people life takes you on unexpected paths, but there's something in there waiting for you that's more beautiful than you can ever imagine.
That's so cool. That's such an amazing experience. So when you were applying for jobs at that degree, maybe you just mentioned this, were you like, I want to go into some sort of analysis, or you're just like, I need to get a job?
Any job.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of how I was out of grad school. I was, even when I was looking for internships, I was like, I don't really know. I was like public policy analysis. I was like, I just need to get a job. It's like applying to everything, applying like nonprofits, on governments and stuff, and ended up in consulting. And then it's kind of interesting because even when you have like, I don't know if this was like for you, but in college for me, I really didn't know what the markets were like, the job markets were like, until I got into an industry and then figured out like, oh, these are actually the different places I want to be. So it's like when you went into finance, is that when you started learning more about, oh, tech's more the area, or yeah, how did you kind of like make that decision of I want to get into Amazon after that?
Yeah, that's such a good observation. I feel it like really brings me back to my college days where I think you know everything. You like think you know what you want, and then you go on the job and you're like, this is not at all what I expected. I think for me, I always knew I wanted to get back into tech because of my internship at Facebook. I like had a taste of what working in tech was like. I was like, there's beer in the office and everyone is so cool and so smart and so fun. And so it was more, I think, culture driven that like I would have taken any role probably in tech. I just happened to be better at data stuff. I think with the engineering and the math background. And so like analytics kind of just made sense. I mean, if someone offered me a marketing role or a sales role, I would probably have taken it too. I just wanted to get back into tech.
How did you get the internship? Like, how did you end up applying and getting into Meta?
I don't know how it is these days, but back when I was in college, there was an internal, like I went to UC Berkeley, so there was an internal Berkeley like college job board thing where the companies would post jobs and then they would spend full days interviewing on campus. I don't know if it's still true. Do y'all know?
I don't know. That's how it was for me in grad school, though. I remember
Yeah,
like
okay.
it would come in, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I just applied and somehow got the job. I honestly have no idea how.
It's amazing. So it's almost like circle for you, right? You tried the internship, and do you know what exactly happened with the internship? Probably that was the reason, what you remembered, and that made you try it again, right?
Is your question why didn't I get an offer?
Yes. Do you remember?
Yes. Yeah. I can tell you, I lived on those mistakes for so long. Again, regretting it. I had such bad imposter syndrome. I just felt like my presence there was annoying to anyone. And there was just like this terrible voice in my head that just told me I was not worthy all the time. So I would go to meetings and I have these questions and ideas and I would not say a word. Like, I don't know if I said like 10 words in all the meetings in my time there. I mean, of course, one-on-one I'm talking. But, like I just like didn't use my voice. I didn't know how to ask for help because, again, it's that voice of like, you don't deserve to be here. You should know all these things. And so I was spending time. I just remember writing queries that would take literally 2.5 hours to run. And I would just be like, okay, I'll wait. I'll like work till like midnight because I'm waiting for queries to run all day. So I think I just didn't know how to ask for help. And then 3, I didn't know how to advocate for myself or build relationships. Right. So I think, and we all know this, a lot of being successful in the industry is building relationships with the right people, not in a sleazy way, but in a way that's really genuine. And I didn't know how to be sleazy or be genuine. I just didn't know how to build relationships. And so the only people I really knew were like the other interns, but I didn't get to know my manager. I didn't get to know my manager's manager. I didn't get to know other people on my team. And I think that was a big detriment for me at the end when people were deciding who to give out offers to.
You know why that happened? Like, why did you feel like that you were not part of the crowd? Was it the interns or what was it? Was it you being maybe international student on visa? Like,
I don't know. I think coming to America and feeling like an outsider for, the first few years of my life really took a hit on me, whether or not I knew it at the time, right? It made me feel like I wasn't worthy and I didn't belong. And I mean, there are a lot of small things add up, right? People making fun of your accent, people telling you don't tell people you're from Singapore, people telling you you don't belong here, right? It's all these little things like that no one ever says with bad intentions that add up to, like, I just internalized all of that and it gave me, like, it took away a lot of my confidence. But I think what's more important is, like, after the internship, I reflected and learned, like, oh, I'm really holding myself back. And it gave me a chance to like fix a lot of those issues. So again, I think it's a good lesson learned.
Yeah, it's interesting how much confidence is just like a part of successfulness in your career. Like I used to be the same way too. I remember I was much more introverted. Now we're on a podcast and you can't shut me up. But like before, like I remember being in meetings when I was at PwC, and you'd have the ideas, you'd have the questions, and it's just like something holding you back where you're scared to like say it, especially when you're in rooms with very important people and partners. And of course you'd like hear someone else say the thing that you were going to say, and everyone's like, oh, great idea, Bill. And it's like, I was thinking that for 20 minutes. And consulting was kind of higher pressure too, because I would get feedback from my manager or partners that were like, hey man, John, you need to be talking in those meetings with clients, because otherwise they're like, why are we paying this hourly thing for this associate to even be here? And I was like, oh man, I just want to like do stuff behind the scenes. But it wasn't until later on, I think. For me, it was, I think I came to that same realization as you. I was holding myself back, but it was also, I had like really good managers and peers who were give me a lot of positive feedback and reinforcement on work I was doing when I was even being quieter. And then they would connect me with other people, and having that kind of bridge from other people to basically get my work out there and teeing it up for me and stuff, made it a lot easier. Just an important part of like, I don't know, having like someone on your side to tee you up.
Yeah, that's such an important message, because I think for people to hear, me included, it's like, I see you, I talk to you, you seem so confident. Again, you're on a podcast, right? You're like putting yourself out there. But it's helpful to know that, you know, we all had this journey. And if anyone's kind of feeling that way, knowing there's so much you can do to get out of there. And if you're not happy being in this situation, like you don't want to be the fly on the wall, you don't want to be the quiet one in the back, you can do something about it. You can build your confidence slowly, find a mentor, find people who believe in you, and you can slowly work up to whoever you idolize.
Yeah. And there's also like other avenues for getting your ideas out there too. I actually think another perk for me was like silver lining of the pandemic. When we all went remote, it's a lot easier for me, I think, to speak to a camera and like it in this kind of virtual thing. It's a lot less pressure when you're in a room with 40 people when compared to a few people on the screen, and then all these people are hidden on the side. But I also love companies that have a documentation culture for that reason, where if you don't even like speaking in that situation, like, hey, Shravi and I have both been at companies before where it's like, hey, here's a document, we're going to send it out beforehand, or we're even going to have some like quiet reading time for 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and just put your comments in the doc. And I love that companies that like kind of make that space for people to get their ideas out there too, because everyone's not comfortable with it and they have really good ideas. So it's a shame when they don't get to say it.
So for me, my part of the story, oh my God, it's so interesting that all of us had these. So for me, I've always been out there, an extrovert, just talk to people. It generally didn't mind just speaking outside, irrespective of how bad my idea would have been. But one thing that I've seen myself get into is when, so I did computer science engineering, but my master's was less of engineering and more of business. Probably could be close to what you did in your bachelor's. So I ended up liking the business part a lot more, and spend a lot of time like in the creative ideas and just thinking through product and what to do and all that. But when I ended up in like a job where I had PhDs in stats and math, and even 10 years ago, we didn't have ML engineers as a title. Everyone were data scientists, like data and applied or research scientists. So we all sat together. And I used to feel, I don't know, dumb, or I'm not good enough to be among this crowd because I didn't have a PhD in math. And later on, for me, to gain that confidence to speak up in the room was majorly identifying my superpower. What am I good at? And why do I think it is important for this set of people? Yes, we might come up with the most amazing solution, which is the most advanced, that would need like a lot of understanding of math and a deep understanding of ML. But if that is not going to solve a customer problem, and you do not tell the story to the executives in a creative way for them to get the gist of it, then it doesn't eventually like get impacted, or you have impact of it. So I was that person. So I was working with PhD people when I just came out of masters and made sure that the story made sense to the business objective, to the product. And the more and more I did that, the more and more I got Sean, like your manager, who like reaffirmed that this is amazing. I didn't think of a way to put this in front of the senior director. This is a great job, the way you put up this deck and, all of that stuff. I then started valuing, oh, I'm good at this. This is a unique skill set of mine. And that doesn't mean it's lower, higher than anyone else. And it's like we need every part of the puzzle in the story, right? If there's only one side, then that doesn't make impact the data stories go through. So I realized what my superpower was, what I bring into the team, and just focusing on that rather than my weakness at that point of time, and just like reinforcing that, let people see me in my brightest light and energy. And that's when they're like, oh, Stavia is amazing and she's great. And then that's when I started working on my weakness as well. And, overall became like this, like I would say, a full circle professional. Yeah.
I love that. The idea of just, you don't need to be the best at everything. You just need to remember or figure out what your unique value prop is and bring that voice to the table and then expand to everything else. Just you go stop somewhere and find where you're unique first, and that's a good place to start.
What's your superpower, Don?
Gosh.
You let yourself into that question.
Yeah. I can shoot lasers out of my eyes, and I also have super strength and invisibility.
Wow, yours are better than mine. I was going to say I'm good at simplifying complex topics, but yours
yeah,
is
you are
better.
really you are really good at that. Yeah, I love like the kind of lessons and stuff you share when we follow you on LinkedIn, and you're very good at simplifying complex topics for sure.
Totally agree. And not just simplifying, Dawn, I think you bring creativity to it, which I see less in the field of tech, being honest. Probably it could be there's the other side of Dawn, right, who's like a dancer and who loves art. So probably you don't talk about it in your tech work, but the colors you choose, the design elements, and how you even like have your carousel, they stand out. So would love to understand from your perspective, how do you think this other part of Dawn influenced your like professional part of Dawn?
I used to think they were completely separate worlds that didn't belong together, right? So I would dance after work. I mean, I still don't dance at work, but I dance after work, and I take all my creative energy and spend it on the weekends. I would focus on work and just be like who I thought a data scientist to be, right? Like very serious, very studious, smart. Usually words I don't describe myself as. But then as I got to see more people, especially at Instagram, there were a lot of data scientists who I looked up to who were very creative people. And I started being able to pull in elements of what I like to do, which is like think of different ways to do the same thing. And I started pulling those elements into my day-to-day job. So I remember very clearly the first time I saw a deck at Instagram that was like truly different from anything I had ever seen before. It was so beautiful. It looked like it was a data science deck, but it looked like a designer put it together. And it was so simple and it was so clear what the message was. And that like was a big mindset shift for me where I'm like, oh, I don't need to put these decks together like how I think a consultant would. I can put it together any way I want, right? And I've kind of taken that and ran over the years, right? I put them to the carousels a little bit here and there. I think about how we can communicate things, whether it be internally or externally, in ways that are exciting and new so that people actually want to pay attention. And it's been really, really fun. I also think generally I would say I think creativity is a big part of data science that isn't really talked about. All the problems that can be solved with standard solutions probably have been solved or have been automated, right? So now more and more being able to be creative in the way you solve problems becomes more important as a data scientist. And so if you feel like you're a creative person, I think find a way to pull that in to your data science work and let that be your superpower.
Yeah, I love that. Like connecting with your audience is such an important part of getting whatever you want to happen. Like, especially you compared it to like the consultant deck. It's like when I was in consulting, our decks were just like, so much crap in there. So they're paying me for this thing. I'm selling them. I want it to everyone, like, and it's not just like me at the junior level. It's like at the exec level. There's like pump it full of all this information, get as many people involved. So it's like they're getting their money's worth. But realistically, as a consultant, like, you're getting paid either way. Like if they don't act on it, that's kind of like they're bad or whatever. Whereas then when you're in industry, in the company, I want this thing to happen. How do I convince people? And just the data itself doesn't do it. Like you have to capture their attention. I did a deck one time that was all Indiana Jones themed, and I can't even remember what it was for, but like we definitely got that project greenlit because it was like full of jokes and stuff.
That sounds so fun. Like that's what I aspire to be, you know, like silly but informative at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you want the point across. Sometimes when you're too serious and intense, the points they don't get across. People are just too busy, like not even like focusing as much as you want them.
I think it depends on your audience. I can't remember, one of you just said that. It really depends on like who you're talking to. If I was going to a board of directors meeting, I don't know if I have the balls to be that creative. But if I was doing an all hands for the company where I know most people are not data people, I would try and make it as fun as possible.
Yeah.
So people are going to pay attention and just like slip in a little bit of data stuff so that, you know, they get what they need to know while also thinking it's something exciting, which data is exciting.
Yeah. And I feel like these days too, with so many remote meetings, even when you're in the office, people are like at different parts of the office, like tuning into all hands or whatever on their laptop. You can have all these other browser tabs open. You got your camera off. Are those people really paying attention? You got to capture them somehow. It's not like before where you're in the room and it's very clear if Sean's in the corner on his laptop looking at something else.
Yeah, but you guys are both remote now too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Shravi, you too? Okay.
Yeah, currently, yes. But probably we all will move towards the world of return to office at some point. So yeah, Dawn, going back to, so you were an industrial engineer who wanted to get into any job to make sure your visa stays on and you get a job and you've applied to multiple areas and then you got into finance. And from there, you didn't see yourself working in that domain. So you wanted to get back to tech because of your intern experience that you've seen in tech. So how did you go from that to Amazon's BA? Do you think you've tried multiple things or did you like have this path already in your head? Now that I have here, I'll go to BA and BIE or was it more organic?
I wanted to be a data scientist. So business analyst wasn't really on my radar, but like I said, going back into tech was a priority for me. So I applied a lot. I applied to everything. I used the easy apply feature. I have no problem with it. I just applied to everything. Obviously for companies I like more, I would write a cover letter. I think at that time, cover letters meant a little bit more. And then the first time I tried, I think was 2 years out of college and got a few interviews, failed all of them. So couldn't move into tech, stayed in finance, felt bad about myself, but you know, wallowing in my own self-pity wasn't going to help me. So I, 1 year later, started applying again. This time got more interviews, interviewed at probably 5 or 7 data science roles. Got rejected for all of them. But I did get this one Amazon business analyst role. And like I said earlier, the catch was a 40% pay cut. But I was like, I'll take it. And
that's crazy. 40%'s a lot. That's like,
it's a lot.
Yeah.
My manager at the time was like, we can pay you more money. I was like, it's okay. I'm already taking a 40% pay cut. I'm leaving. Yeah. No, but it's the right decision for me. In the long run, I ended up making way more. I don't know what it would have been if I stayed in finance, but it was the right decision for me.
What I love, Dawn, about this is, wait, you're like 2-3 years out of bachelor's? Is that what it was at that point of time, right?
3.5 years, yeah.
And you already had it in your head that if what you value as a person in the next job, you'd value your path to tech in data science, not the comp. So I was at this university over the last weekend, and I was telling them, make sure. So we were talking about metrics and work and, things of product and metrics, but I moved that to people, and you need to understand what your, metrics are. What do you want to go after? Do you want to go after compensation? Do you want to go after like a long-term metric that you're not going to see today? Could be you getting into a field, you getting into management, like whatever it is that for you, but understanding that and going towards that. Because if you don't know what you're going towards, you're going to end up randomly doing multiple things. I mean, probably that's one way, too, I guess. But so that's pretty incredible that you had this right out of bachelor's, 3 years into bachelor's.
I think I was always kind of a reckless person, but I think I hear what you're saying. I think at every point in your life, you should know what your priorities are. And you know that changes year to year, week to week, maybe not week to week, that's a little crazy, but it changes every few years, right? So at that time, my priority was getting into tech at all costs. But 4 or 5 years later, if you ask me the same question when I was looking for jobs, comp was my number one thing on my priority list. Right, at that point, I was already in tech. I knew I had a lot more bargaining power. And I didn't mind leaving tech at that time. But now it's like, you have to pay me what it's worth. So it's really, I think you're right. Just figure out what's important to you. Make sure you are able to articulate that to the hiring managers and to the recruiters if you're looking for a new job.
Yeah. Being honest with yourself in terms of what you want and what you're willing to give is so important. I'm sure you all have like clients that you coach too who are like, I want to graduate from here and be at the best firm and make the most money, and I want to come in at this higher level, and all this stuff is like, well, I don't know, you're competing against a lot of people. You gotta be willing to take some trade-off, and like whether it's work-life balance is gonna suffer for a bit, or maybe you want that, so you're gonna take some sacrifice on comp or whatever. Be honest with yourself too, because you're gonna be in that position, and then you want to make sure you're happy and your expectations are where they are.
Yeah, that's a good. I have a question. Have either of you sacrificed work-life balance at some point in your career, and do you feel like it was worth it?
I've definitely had some, I've definitely done some stuff where I was like, I'm just grinding.
I know you've done it, Sean. I've seen you.
Consulting was grinding. Next door was awesome. Like, I loved everyone there, but I was like grinding pretty hard. My job at Fully was like way chiller than that. But also when I went to next door, I doubled my salary and the promotions were coming a lot faster because I was putting in a lot of hours. And then, now I have to make a decision around, do I want to grind that hard? Or do I want to chill a little bit more? Not going to be sitting on my hands or something, but there are definitely periods where I've kind of made that investment because I'm in a place where I can learn a lot and have good management, and I know I'll get the return on my time. Whereas there are other companies that you could sacrifice work-life balance and then not get anything out of it. You could be like, why am I working like twice as much as that person and we're getting the same rewards? So you have to make sure you're in the right kind of environment for it too, I think.
So to add on to Sean's point, I think work-life balance comes into the picture when, for me, this is just my opinion, when you kind of working on things for the work and not for yourself. If the work that I'm doing is something that I genuinely enjoy and I'm like having fun, then to me, I would like not watch a Netflix series over, getting to this and finding this big opportunity that I'm personally excited about. The values match with me, where we're going would match with me. I would get a lot of enjoyment out of that over watching maybe 2-3 hours of Netflix. So that to me is very important.
Yeah.
Loving what I work on. If that's not happening, then I'll think about my work-life balance is pretty hard.
Yeah. I love that framing. No, that's such a good framing because you could be working long hours and still have work-life balance if the work you're doing fulfills you somehow.
Yeah.
I think it's what you're saying. And that's such a good reframing because I feel like I've had those experiences in my life before where I worked extra hours. I worked a little bit on the weekends and I felt fulfilled doing that. But then I've also had the inverse, and Sean, you're kind of talking about this earlier too, which is I felt like I was grinding it out. I was sacrificing my mental health and my physical health. And at the end of the day, I took a step back and was like, I did not gain anything from this.
Yeah.
the owner of the company is going to be richer and I'm going to make the same amount of money. And it just, and I had no personal fulfillment from that. I didn't feel like I was growing my career. And I think that's when I felt like the work-life balance was not the right sacrifice for me.
Yeah, I had a similar vibe when I was in consulting. It was work that was very much pushed on me, whereas like you need to create this sales deck for this person who probably is not even going to sign on with us. And you need to stay up until 4 a.m. tonight because we're going to present it at 6 a.m. tomorrow. And then, you grind a bunch. And at the end of the year, it's like, hey, I've gotten 5 out of 5 on all my like reviews from my peers and my manager. And like, am I like going to get the promotion? And they're like, oh, no, if you wanted a promotion, you should have told us about that 6 months ago. I was like, okay, am I getting like a merit raise? And they're like, oh, actually, when you got hired, we gave you a higher salary than the other people coming in. So we're actually paying you too much as it is. That was one of those times where I was like, okay, work-life balance is not worth the trade-off there. But other places, it's been really good. I love something with me that I also find for work-life balance is I'm much more willing to put in that extra time when you guys said, it's something that I'm passionate about, and B, when it's like, I choose when to do it. If I'm like, hey, I can go on a run in the middle of the day in the afternoon or go skiing in the morning, and then like, maybe I'm going to work till 10 p.m. or midnight tonight, but I did my time and my choice, then I'm totally down with that. That works for me. Other people's other stuff works for them.
I remember we were working together next door, and I was up Friday, 1 a.m. Like no one would work. I was working on something interesting and I go to this deck and then I see Sean active there editing. I'm like, dude, only you and I are going to do this work here.
Oh, 11 p.m. on a Friday night.
I don't know. One of those things. I think we were working on something fun. I don't exactly remember, but yeah, basically to condense it, if work-life balance come into the picture when work and life are really kind of separate, where life values and life mission and what you enjoy as a life is different than the work. But if they kind of munch together, like you work in a company where your value systems aligns with the company, you work for a manager that you feel like they're not like a manager, more like your mentor and your coach, then all of these don't become two worlds anymore. They kind of are in the same world. And if you have a good manager who is like your coach and they help you move to higher places and you're working on it and you love that work, I think then you're in a good place. So that's the reason. Maybe at the start you could do, Dawn, like what you've done or what all of us have done, just get into something and then find your superpower and find what you value more and find a job with a great mentor, manager, coach side of a person. And you could do whatever there to make sure that you enjoy the work and that eventually like helps you grow as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Having a good manager or mentor is so important at every stage in your career. I mean, I think so. I've worked in a professional world for 11 years. I don't know what to be like when I'm at 20 or 50 years, but in the first 11 years, I think having a good mentor and a good manager makes such a big difference in how quickly you can grow and how much better you are at your job. And I think about my managers who I've had, and like the ones that I learned from the most, the ones I think are the best managers weren't necessarily like the nicest managers ever. They're the hardest critics, but I think those are the ones that really make you grow. So I guess if you're looking for a new job, find a manager that you really think will push you to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, what's some of the lessons you think you've learned from great mentors or managers? And then you do a lot of mentorship too, so I'm sure obviously it's very important to you.
Yeah, I love mentoring people. Let's see. Your question was greatest lessons?
Yeah, that you
Good
like
lesson
learned
segment.
like stuff. I mean, stuff where it's like, I wouldn't have learned this on my own, or if I would have taken a lot longer for me to learn on my own.
Yeah, I think for me, the best lessons were how to increase the ROI on your time. And that comes in so many different ways, right? If you think about the return on investment, there is value over, let's call it time/effort, right? So whether it be how do you do work more efficiently by working on the most important problems, by productionizing your pipelines, by getting feedback early, right? Those are all ways to like reduce the time or effort investment on your ROI equation. Or if you think about the numerator, how do you bring the most value, right? So that could be like building the right stakeholder relationships so that you're influencing the people who can make the decisions. Or how do you communicate your results best? Or how do you work on problems that actually matter and you're not wasting time working on, or like you're not doing low value tasks? How do you learn to say no to things? To me, those were the most effective in making me a better data scientist. But I've also had managers who, or mentors and managers who've taught me a lot of things kind of like outside work, like how do you build confidence? How do you learn to stand up for yourself at work? And those lessons I feel like were also immensely helpful. And it's probably the combination of both like the data science work and the soft skills that helped me grow in my career.
Anything that like you still remember that you kind of do it every day or that helped you?
One of my favorite ones is a female mentor who told me, she's like, you just got to walk in there with the confidence of a man.
Oh, wow.
And I think about that all the time. I don't even know what that really means, but and she'd be like, I actually tell a lot of my mentees this, and I think it works kind of whether you're negotiating a job offer, negotiating a promotion, just speaking up in meetings. It's like, if you were a man, what would you do? Sorry, Sean, I know you're a man. Actually, maybe you can now answer the question. So I think about that a lot, right? There's stats like women only apply to jobs when they hit 90% of the qualifications. These are probably old stats. I'm going to state them anyway. Women only apply to jobs when they hit 90% of qualifications versus men apply for jobs when they hit 50%, right? So how do you put yourself in a position that gives yourself more chances by just believing in yourself a little bit more? So that's a big confidence fund I use like at least once a week.
That's very interesting. So basically, just show up with confidence, irrespective of what it is. And that's going to just help you get into any situation and stand up for yourself.
Oh, I have another one. Maybe this one's more appropriate for the podcast. It's someone once told me, no one here knows what they're doing. And that was at Meta. And I was like,
Wow.
What? They're like, no, I've been here for 5 years. No one here knows what they're doing. And it just like, made me realize like, I also don't know what I'm doing. None of us know what we're doing. We're all trying our best and we're figuring it out and we're making the best decisions at every point. So this is not a knock on people who are at the company, but it was a reminder to me, like there is a lot of times no right answer. There's no one right path. And everyone is constantly dealing with the uncertainty and trying to make the best decision at every point. And just recognizing that helped me build a lot of confidence. I'm like, I don't know the answer, but no one does either. Given what I do know, what is the best decision I can make at this point?
Yeah, kind of goes in line with like one of the things that got me to be more confident is just don't care what other people think, just be yourself. It's a really hard thing to do. And I did come to some realization where I was like, oh, dude, the worst someone's going to say to me is like, that's a bad idea. First of all, no one's going to say that. No one's going to say that to your face. If they are, then that person is an asshole and you shouldn't even be listening to them anyways. But, and that's like anything in life, not just work. I think once I came to that realization of like, same with the negotiating, right? It's like negotiating an offer or whatever. Just ask. The worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no. They're going to be like, I can't believe you asked for that much. I'm taking that offer back now. Like no one's going to do that. And same thing again, if a company is doing that kind of thing, you don't want to work for them anyways. There's like a Churchill quote that I don't know if I get the number of ages right exactly, but it's something like when you're in your 20s, like you care what everyone thinks. When you're in your 40s, you stop caring what they think. And then when you're in your 60s, you realize like no one ever cared about whatever you were thinking in the first place. And that's kind of where I'm at. It's like no one's over there analyzing like what you're saying and thinking about it and being like, ooh, bad idea, Sean, stupid. Like, Sean's the worst. Like no one's thinking that. Like they're listening to you and they're wrapped up in their own stuff and their own mind, just like we all are. And the best you can do is say something that other people are thinking to help validate like, oh, I was thinking that too. And they think that wasn't a good idea. I mean, but it's hard to internalize that, get that external after.
Yeah, I think, Sean, you basically touched on a point about this internal dialogue that we have with ourselves all the time. So I think Dawn mentioned that as part of her internship at, Meta, back in the day, Facebook, that I'm not good enough, or, oh, that was such a bad idea. Just changing that internal dialogue to yourself, that you are amazing, or what you think is totally okay. No one knows better. So just talking to yourself, the most friendliest way. I think this was the code too, right? Talk to yourself like how you talk to a friend. So when one starts doing that, you basically are more secure, more confident, and you come up with a lot more happier and, meaningful way of how you live your life versus you're always so hard on yourself to the detriment of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think people really overestimate how much other people care about them. And I am completely guilty of this, right? Like before I started writing on LinkedIn, I had to like journal out, like, why am I not, I was wanting to promote this ebook I wrote. I'll send a link. But so I like journaled out like, okay, why am I so hesitant to write on LinkedIn? And I had these like voices pop up in my head of like, who does she think she is? She's not even a good data scientist. Ew, what's she doing? This is so cringe. And then
my wife calls me cringe all the time though for writing on LinkedIn. And I'm like, whatever. Look at all those likes I got. Like, yeah, here.
You tell her.
Not cringe.
But yeah, I feel like most people don't care. And if they really hate it, they can unfollow. Yeah. I think about this analogy from dance class. A lot of newbies who come to dance class are like, I don't want to go. I'm so embarrassed. People are going to judge me. And I'm like, I can tell you after being to like hundreds, maybe thousands of dance classes, the only person I'm looking at in the mirror is myself for the whole class. And it's the same with life. People are more concerned with what they're doing than what you're doing. And if you do something great, they'll pay attention. And if you do something really crazy, they'll pay attention and they'll forget it in like a second. Other people don't care enough about you.
So I'm just thinking about this right now. So probably, especially I grew up in like Indian Asian households, and maybe when we were growing up, when we were kids, probably the world was different than where we are right now. So for some reason, we saw adults around us think about the same things that we were thinking. Probably they cared a lot more how the world would look at them the way they were doing things. For us, it's so hard to remove those biases that we grew up with, maybe. So just like another idea.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me, because I hear my mom say this to me, or she said this to me a few times growing up, not a lot, but she'd be like, what would people think if I let my daughter do that?
Yeah, yes.
And I think to your point, right? Like maybe there was a lot more judgment, in
our
generation.
generations, in our parents' generation, and they talked about it. Probably not, if not our parents, could be our aunts, could be like just someone else that we were surrounded by. And that got into our heads, and that's how that we are here. So probably people in their late 20s, 30s, and maybe 40s, they go through this a lot when compared to, I would say, teens right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's very possible.
Yeah. So Dawn, now like changing the gears a bit. So wanting to understand how was the journey as a BA? So if you were in Amazon, like let's say there are people out there who are analysts, and or maybe not even analysts, probably they are in entirely non-tech areas. Like what did you think your journey or what you are seeing right now would help people like that?
Yeah, I can talk about that. I think I was pretty calculated or intentional, maybe not calculated. I was pretty intentional in the way I approached my career transition. I got to Amazon as an analyst and I realized my whole job was writing SQL queries. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a very poor use of my time, right? You're just writing queries to pull data for people all day long. And so I realized that I identified it as an opportunity for automation, right? So what if I didn't have to write SQL queries and I could build, because these SQL queries are relatively simple, and what if I could just build a tool that allowed people to pull their own data? And so I pitched the idea to our director. I think he's a director, the head of the team, and he loved it. And then I didn't do anything about it. And then a few weeks later, he's like, so what's the progress on this? And I was like, oh, I should probably start working on it. There's interest. And so I started building a database. I never built a database before. I have no idea what it entailed. But good thing is at Amazon, you can get AWS credits for free. So I could experiment as much as I wanted to. Yeah, that was very nice. So I just built an AWS database. I started building pipelines. Then I built like an Excel tool on top of the database and put everything in VBA. So nothing fancy. I built like little checkboxes. People could select the columns they want, like the filters they want. And I built this whole tool. And that process of basically like taking my job and automating it and upskilling it by making it like a technical project helped me move from BA to BIE. But when I say helped me, that was like the evidence I gave. I still pushed for a promotion. I was like, look, this is what BIEs do. This is what I'm doing. I should be a BIE. And so then I pushed for that promotion. I had a really wonderful manager. She helped me fight for that promotion, got that promotion. I started writing docs about how we need a bigger team. So I just remember this one now, super jet lag. I stayed up till like 2 a.m. I've never worked at 2 a.m. before in my life. And I was like writing a doc about why we need more people on the team. Sent it to my director. Didn't get a response. Followed up with him. Didn't get a response. But a few months later, I followed up with him again. And then like we got more people. So the project that I worked on that was like my side project ended up becoming like a project with 5 BIEs on it. So I like really pushed for that. And then I spent a lot of time talking to product managers because I want to be a data scientist and I knew I had no product experience. And so I talked to product managers. I looked at their docs. I learned from them. And I like started to get a sense of like, what is product and how does data fit into a product world? Started learning more about product. And I think those are the big 3 things that helped me get into data science. So the 3 things were upskilling myself and like building really impactful projects. That was the database tool thing. Pushing, like learning how to self-promote, and learning about product. I think those are the big things that allowed me to interview again. At that time, I think it was like my 3rd time interviewing at Meta for a data science role. And I think that was the 3rd time. And those 3 things helped me get an offer that 3rd time I interviewed.
Yeah, and I love that the self-promotion part where you knew what the other job was. But this role does, like, I do that. So I should be that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can get caught up because they're waiting for someone to deliver that to them. But you can definitely get lucky and have some really great managers and directors who are just like, hey, I just noticed that you do this thing and you should be promoted to this other thing. But I think a lot of the time you got to be, no one's coming to save you. You got to be like, hey, pay attention over here.
Yeah. I mean, I think people say like, you have to be noisy, right? You have to be like, here's all the things I've done. This is what I want. And ask for it constantly. I think that's a very important skill to have to thrive in corporate America or the corporate world in general.
And you very clearly had a goal from every part of your journey. You had this goal of like the next thing. And like you said, very calculated in how you get there.
I love what you said regarding be noisy. And you have to be noisy to make sure people hear what you've done and self-promote yourself to make sure that you sustain and be successful in corporate America. To be honest, I really think this helps you anywhere. It could be even in a relationship. It could be in like, in a social circle, like, wherever, right? You should just be noisy and let people know.
Yeah. I think it's a corporate America thing, or like, I think it's an American thing. I've never worked outside the country, but from what I hear, and maybe it's a generational thing, but when I talk to my mom, who works for an American company, but like a Singapore company that got acquired by America, she says the culture is just completely different. Like in Singapore, you don't self-promote. Like that's just, it comes across as bragging and not humble, and people don't like that. But when you talk to your American colleagues, you have to self-promote. You have to be like, oh, here are all the things I've done. So she's got that interesting perspective, and I always felt like, okay. In corporate America, I have to push for myself.
I didn't do this, but they had this thing at Stripe that people literally called brag docs. And it was like whenever someone mentioned you in Slack or like it was like good job or something, people would take a screenshot and put it in a document. And then later on, they're like, look at all the people who said I did a good job on these things. It seems like you kind of have to do that in order to get a promotion. Some of these larger companies, because there's so many people, there's only enough promotions for X amount.
Yeah. At Meta, that was definitely the case. We didn't call it a brag doc. We called it your performance review. And it was just, you screenshot what people had said about you. You put in everything you've done, like all your impact stuff. Even if you weren't trying to get a promotion, that would just get you to like meet expectations.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So to sum it up, to up level yourselves from any position to the next position that you're interested in, first make sure that you know the goal, what you're going after, know the goal, upskill, whatever it is. If it's SQL, if it's Python, if it's going to be Excel, from where you are to where you want to go. And after that, once you know your goal and once you upskill, then it's about self-promoting yourself into that and ensuring that you have the right relationships, that you build the right relationships. Like in your case, that you build a relationship with the product managers to understand data science product. And then you do this iteratively, learn from how it happened, and then eventually move into that step.
Yeah, I think iteratively is a very important keyword there. I've seen people want to give up after a couple of failures. And I mean, I started posting on Instagram, and honestly, I go through that process every day as I like hate all the videos I make. You just like want to give up constantly. And I think the key is to just stick through that awful, awkward phase, because one day you're going to look back and be like, oh, I did it.
Yeah.
So consistency, right? Consistently doing it, iterating it, learning, and then moving on. And that's the path to success, whatever your goal is.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. Whatever your goal is, I think this framework should generally work.
The relationship part of it that you mentioned, Shravya, is so interesting too, because it is like, it's not just your manager that needs to know you're doing a good job. And the people you need to know, it changes when you're moving up levels. Like maybe in the beginning from junior to mid, or it's just your manager. But like when I was going from senior to staff, my manager was like, okay, we planned this out like a year before. He was like, to get to staff, you got to get in front of all these other people, because these are the people who will be in the room making the decision about your promotion. And even if you're doing really good work and providing value to the company, if they're like, oh, I don't know who Sean is, I haven't talked to them, then they're probably not going to vouch for you. You got to have those people actually know you to have your back later on. Relationships is such a important part of it.
This is so interesting, right? When I started out, I wish I knew this, because this is not in any upskilling talks that you'll find in your company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, make sure you're good at this and this. But no one talks about how important these side things are that will actually causally, I wish we could do like a causal analysis on this, it'll impact you from getting promoted, moving roles or whatnot, right? Making sure you know who else you need to get a buy-in from and having a relationship with them, understanding what they value. It could be an impact on the product. It could be just building a relationship. It could be just trying to help them out beyond your job. But knowing that, building that relationship and working towards that, these are the things still exist in the world that are not talked about, but are like hidden in between the lines and in between the stories.
I missed out on so many promotions like the first 4-5 years of my career because I just like did not get how that worked. So I had to learn it through like failure. Hopefully other people can like listen to this or something and figure it out. But Don, it seems like you figured that out pretty early on, like these different things you have to execute on. And then you eventually got so good at it. You're like, I'm going to promote myself into my own business. So tell us a little bit like that transition to like entrepreneurship and what drove you in that direction. Because
it's a massive change, and I'm still trying to figure it out. It's been less than 2 months since I quit my job, so I'm really trying to figure all of it out. The thought process was pretty simple. I have a hypothesis about the world that I want to test it out. It's pretty much that. I think in the hypothesis being pretty simple, and I think a lot of people have this hypothesis, in the world where AI is so powerful, I think one-person businesses are much easier to run and much easier to start, build, and run. Mm-hmm. And this is the hypothesis I want to test out. I also think I'm very, very lucky in that I'm surrounded by a lot of people who give me so much support. And like, it feels like a risk, but it doesn't feel like a risk, right? So like my parents are like, you have to do this now. Like, nothing ventured, nothing gained. You have to try it. And my partner is a business owner. He's building his business too. And my best friend has her own business too. So I feel like I'm just surrounded by all these people who make me feel like I can do it. And maybe in a year from now, I might have a different story. The story will probably be different. We'll just see where that story goes. And I think I'm just like, I have this hypothesis. I want to test it. And I have some savings. And now's the good time to do it.
It's a great hypothesis. And I bet it's going to work, Dawn. So glad that you brought it up. And also, so one other thing, Dawn, so before we probably are close to wrap it up, so what are some top things that you see have worked with your mentors? We could do both technical and non-technical. If there's someone that wants to crack this data science product job, could be from analyst to data science product, could be from just got laid off and it's been pretty hard for them to crack a job. What are your top 5 things or top 3 things for technical and non-technical?
Yeah. I love this question because, I used to have such a high from getting a job every 3 years when I interviewed, but now I can get it every month because I have clients who are doing it. It's so fun.
Nice.
So a couple of things. I think the biggest one by far is communication. And I think it's said over and over again, and I still feel like it needs to be said. You can have all the right answers in the world, but if you can't communicate your ideas in a way that's clear and concise, people aren't going to listen and people aren't going to be convinced. Right? So you have to figure out how to take any question on the spot in an interview and learn to communicate your thought process super clearly. That's the number one thing I work with with 100% of my clients probably. And that makes the biggest difference in helping them get jobs. Number 2, I would say at least 50% of people are not as good at SQL as they think they are. And this is like one of the things that hurts me the most is when clients come to me and they're like, I got it. I do SQL on my job every single day. I'm going to be fine. And then they fail the SQL portion of the interview. And I've seen this a few times and it's so painful to see. And I would say use ChatGPT or get a career coach. Work on the hardest problems. Lead code advanced problems are not hard enough for what you're going to get for a product data science job. You got to be working on really, really difficult problems like complex joins, query optimization, window functions. You have to be really good at SQL. That's number 2 thing. Number 3, statistics, I think is another big one that gets people. I'm just trying to go into technical skills. I've made posts about it. I know, Shravan, you have made posts about this. It was how much statistics you actually need to know. I think you need to know a short list of things, but you need to know it really well and you need to know how to apply it. So again, use ChatGPT. She's your best friend. And then number 4, I would say mock interviews really, really make a big difference. I think I'm biased because I do mock interviews with clients, but some clients work with me for 10 sessions and the progress I see from when they do their first mock interview to the 10th mock interview, it's a world of a difference. And I can tell you they weren't going to get those Mang offers when they started on the first interview. And then after the 10th, they did.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a big difference. Anything else?
Those are amazing points, Don. So maybe let me sum it up before going to the other one. Communicating in a complex thing or whatever you want to say in a precise, straightforward way, the most important, right? And the second one, SQL. You might think you already do SQL, you know SQL, but actually knowing it well enough to pass the interview, generally most people face this as a problem, and that's another thing. And the third one, statistics. And the fourth one, the mock interviews. The mock interviews is the fourth one, making sure you practice basically, right? You might know all of this, but at the end of the day, if you mumble a lot, if you ramble, then I think it'll help you with the communication too a lot, right?
And getting the nerves out. I think that's another big one. Some people still get really nervous doing mock interviews, and then which just tells me you're going to be even more nervous in a real interview. So as much as you can, just get those nerves out or get to a point where you know how to handle those nerves.
Such good ROI too when you think about what's the cost of a mock interview versus how much more you're going to make in the salary when you get this job. Yeah. One more thing for the nerves. I listen to Taylor Swift's Shake It Off before every interview. And I've been doing this for 10 years. Or actually, I don't know if it was out 10 years ago. I've been doing this it's been 10 years since Shake It Off's been out. Yeah, it works great.
That's such a good tip.
That's amazing. So Dawn, now what about people that don't have interviews? And if you have to give them top 3 to 4 things, these are the people that are analysts that want to break into data science? What do you think they should be doing?
Okay, if you're already an analyst, I would try to switch roles within your company if data science is an option. That's just so much easier than trying to hop into another company, especially in this current market where it's really competitive. So if you're an analyst and you're trying to switch into data science, I would start networking with those data science folks and start to do small projects for them in your spare time. Or if you have a manager that's very understanding, you can find a good balance where you're doing some analytics work and some data science work, but internal transfers are going to be your best bet. The second thing is use your network. And if you don't have a network, build a network. From my understanding, referrals, if you get in through a referral or you apply for a job through a referral, it typically means your resume gets looked at first, and it definitely gets looked at by a human. So as much as you can, get referrals so that you can increase your chances of getting an interview. And then the third thing is have someone look at your resume. Have someone professional, someone who's in the industry, someone who's one step ahead of you. Doesn't have to be a coach professional, but just someone who knows what they're talking about. Typically, I would say keep it as simple as possible. So no crazy colors, no crazy formatting. Make sure you have a summary section, and then make sure you quantify your impact. I think those are the three most common mistakes I see. Is there anything more? I feel y'all have seen a lot of resumes too.
Yeah, that definitely sums it up. Maybe one other thing before we end. What about people who are not in data and want to break in data?
That's a good question. I mean, start simple, start small, start with building out your skills. I would pick one thing and get extremely good at it, right? So if you're going to pick Excel, you need to know how to do VBA or Power Query. I can't remember what's the database connector. So if you do Excel, become an expert. If you're going to do SQL, become an expert at that. I recommend not doing Python for your first. If you're trying to break into data, I think Python is just a little bit more confusing than the other languages. So I would say pick Excel or SQL and get really good at it. Then start to do little projects to build your confidence, right? So you may start on YouTube, do some guided projects first, then go on Kaggle and start to find these data sets that you're interested in and build your own projects. The way I would do it is I would take 30 minutes of quiet time and write down 10 industries that you're interested in. And then go use those keywords, put them to Kaggle and find a relevant data set. So for example, if you love animals, you could do a pet adoption data set. Or if you love NASCAR, you could look at NASCAR NASCAR race results. Just find something in a space that you are truly passionate about and then do a small project. And then once you have a few projects under your belt, put that in your portfolio, but also start to go out there and volunteer for people. Ask your friends and family if they have data that they can work with for their business. Help them analyze real data, because that's when you start to really work with dirty data and you realize oh, it's very different from those guided projects. And then once you have a few of these real world experiences, then start to apply for jobs. I think you can skip 2 or 3 if you really wanted to. Start applying early. You might get lucky. But this market's super competitive. So I would try to get some street cred under your belt before you start applying. Yeah. And honestly, it's a crazy market right now. I've seen posts of people who are applying to 6,000 jobs and getting 11 interviews. So don't stop at 100. Don't stop at 1,000. Just keep at it. It takes years. I mean, it took me 4 years to get a data science job, and it sucks when you're in the process. But if you really want it, you find a way to pick yourself up after every rejection, and I promise it's going to work out someday. Or someday you're going to think, or someday you're going to realize there's another goal that makes you much more excited, and you're going to go to a set goal instead.
Yeah,
that's good
love
advice.
Love that. So probably, I think we should take. So if we are going to build a framework for people who want to break in data, the first most important thing is make sure that you have at least 1 year into it to succeed into that. At least a year, right? Because it's the first time that you're getting into it. So make sure you're aligned on the timeline, because you're going to get frustrated through the process. And after 1 year, to get anything into data, right? And then probably few years to get into data science, ML or whatever, down the line. Now that you have decided on the at least 1 year committed to fully working into getting into data, first one, pick the most simplest, easiest tool to get into data, SQL, Excel. Go really deep at it and understand the technical intricacies of that tool. The second one, understand what are the most passionate areas that you want to get into in business domains and write them down and pick data sets from Kaggle and other places, get those data and write down all the questions that you want to answer with that data, build projects around it. And once you're there, try to do some voluntary work with real data with other people around and then apply the
Yes.
jobs.
Yes, that sounds right to me. That feels like a good step-by-step roadmap.
Yeah. Okay. So this is amazing. Anything you want to add, Sean?
I was just say, like, I know, Don, you've got so much amazing, great advice for people who are, whether it's progressing in your career or breaking into data or switching roles. Where can we get more advice? I know, obviously, you're on LinkedIn, Don Chu and Data Don, and I follow you on Instagram, Ask Data Don. Are you on TikTok? Or you have a website, or where else can people follow you and learn more?
Just LinkedIn and Instagram for now.
Awesome.
Wait, I have a newsletter. Sorry, I forget I have a newsletter. Hold on, let me find it. I think
we can drop it in the description or the comments or something too of the podcast.
It's askdatadon.com.
That's amazing. Okay. Don, this was amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Loved hearing your stories from where you started actually dancing in Super Bowl. Like, how amazing is that?
Crazy.
To where you are from, starting as a financial analyst to finally an entrepreneur and all the different roles you've done in this area. It's been amazing having you.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
Up. And then people come to this YouTube and it's like the origin story of Don Chu, and we're just got like tens of millions of views. We're like, yeah, I'm glad we got in there.
Give me a few years. It was so great to be here. I love talking to you too. You guys have such good energy, and this was so much fun.
Awesome.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.